Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is Augie of the Blago Blabber Podcast, back for episode number 13, lucky 13, hopefully. This week in sports, and I figured I'd lead it off with, I'm going to get right to business. Figured I'd get to the Carson Wentz trade. So Carson Wentz was drafted second overall. The Philadelphia Eagles got a second-round pick and a third-round pick, 4 or 5 years after they drafted him first overall? Now, when you compare that to what the Houston Texans want for Deshaun Watson, oh, man. And, we could say that Deshaun Watson was taken, a few picks out. Not the same draft. I don't think it was the same draft. But, a few picks after Carson, but when you compare the two players and where they are in their careers, oh man, much different paths that they're currently on. So when you look at the trade, overall football, I don't know if I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but football and hockey, I believe I did mention it, but football and hockey are a little bit different than any, I don't want to say any other sport, but much different than what we're used to with basketball, I guess, because there's so many more rounds. So there's 5 more rounds than there are in basketball. So there's 7, basketball there's 2. So when you trade away, a second and third rounder, usually in football that's a big deal because you get starters in the second and third round in the NFL draft. You could get starters in the 5th round in the NFL draft. And that's why it's so much different than, for example, an NBA draft where there's 2 rounds. And you're drafting in the first round, a lot of the time you're not even drafting starters. You're drafting guys who are going to come on the bench, at least for the first, couple years or so. Now, when you look at where Carson Wentz was drafted, second overall, then, a second rounder and a third rounder, it's not exactly what, Philly thought that they would be giving up. And obviously they probably didn't think they were going to be giving up their franchise quarterback, I guess, at the time, 4 or 5 years after he was drafted second overall, sorry. So it's a pretty sticky situation for Philly, and Carson Wentz's downfall, he gets injured quite a bit now. The one thing I'll say in his defense is he just hasn't had the weapons around him to succeed. A lot of guys out with injury, and that hasn't helped. And his O-line isn't very good. But you know who has a good O-line? The Indianapolis Colts. I believe they're ranked 7th last year. Very good offensive line. He's going to a coach that he's familiar with. This is going to be sort of his last chance, I think, in NFL as a starter, at least. As a backup, he'll probably get more chances if this doesn't work out for him. But as a starter, this has got to be it. This is his second chance. We've already seen a little downfall, if you want to call that, from him. And he gets sacked a lot and stuff like that. So this is probably his last chance as a starter to prove himself. Otherwise, it's going to be, second, third stringer. And it's crazy, how we got here. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and, all of a sudden he, falls off a cliff. Injuries, guys out, stuff like that. So it's sad to see. I just, a lot of people have been saying, I just don't like the way he's handled it. When he found out he was benched, he threw a hissy fit of some sorts, and, he wasn't happy with it. Well, I'm you're glad he's not happy with it because obviously he wants to start. He wants to play football. But now he's going to go to the Colts and he's going to get a chance. And it's funny because, a lot of the speculation in the offseason was who's going to go? Is it going to be Doug Peterson or is it going to be Wentz? And it was most of the time it was either one or the other. It's not going to be both, and both aren't going to stay and stuff like that. So it's very interesting that both ended up, Doug Peterson gets fired and Wentz gets traded. So that's very interesting. So, obviously, where does Philly go from here? Is Jalen Hurts the starter going forward? Are they going to draft a quarterback maybe in the later rounds, maybe in the first round, maybe they move up? You just never know. So right now, it probably looks like Jalen Hurts is going to be the starter. and that they're not going to draft a quarterback in the first round, or maybe they take someone in third, fourth round, or whatever it may be. But it looks like it's Jalen Hurts' job to lose. And I like what he showed, in the second half of the season. He could throw a little bit, he could run, he could use his feet. So if they can improve that O-line, yeah, you never know. And it's a division that's kind of up in the air. Like, we don't know what's going to happen with Dak. The Washington situation, they have a good defense, but where are they going forward with their quarterback situation? Dwayne Haskins was cut. What happens with the Giants with Daniel Jones? Like, there's a lot of guys, like a lot of the quarterbacks apart from Dak in this division, are only 2-3 seasons in. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that division. Is it possibly going to be even worse than it was last year, which is hard to believe, but you never know, just because there's so much uncertainty with what's going to happen. And, the trade kind of, I don't know if it surprised people, but like I said, it was either going to be Wentz or Doug Peterson, and then, both are gone. And now it's Jalen Hurts' job to lose, pretty much. So that's something just to keep an eye on. Are they going to go out and draft protection for Jalen Hurts, or receivers, or what? But yeah, Wentz's new start, new team, better offensive line, no more excuses. He has time to, get to know his teammates before the season gets underway and stuff like that. It's only mid-February, I guess, end of February. So, there's no more excuses. And like I said, this is probably his last real shot in the NFL to be a starting quarterback. NBA All-Star Game. LeBron has voiced his opinion, saying, he'll be there physically but not mentally. Giannis would rather spend it with his family, which I don't blame him. Anyone who wants to spend, time with family, I don't blame them. It's just a weird season overall, to tell you the truth. But I believe that the NBA has something in store, like in terms of all the All-Star festivities, from the dunk contest and all that other stuff. And we don't really even know, like, it's going to take place in Atlanta, but are we going to have the other festivities? Is it just going to be an All-Star game? Is it, like, rookies, sophomores, whatever, or world against America, whatever it is. So that's going to be an interesting thing to, I guess, kind of follow going forward. But yeah, I just don't blame guys with everything that's going on. Road trips and back-to-backs, and I get that back-to-backs happen all the time, but it's a more condensed schedule. Guys are picking up injuries, guys are going down, hurt seems by the night. Positive tests, guys got to quarantine for 7 days, 14 days. And the craziest part is, like, I looked at this, and at the beginning of the season, I'm like, man, if a team misses the playoffs or the play-in by like a game or half a game, and their best player sat out for, COVID concerns for whatever it is, 7 to 14 days, man, and they lost, let's say, 2 or 3 games that they probably would have won if they had their star player. Whew. You know what I mean? So it's a tough situation. But the All-Star game is I personally, I wouldn't go through with it. I think if more guys, I actually think if more guys voice their opinion, I don't think that's going to change what the NBA does going forward. Guys are still going to show up, and I think that's the most important part to the NBA, that they show up. If they're there, as long as they're there physically, mentally, if they're not there, I mean, there's other guys who will pick up the slack who have more to prove, I guess, if you want to say. So maybe, if you're someone who bets out there, maybe it's a smart idea to put your money on maybe a dark horse for the MVP or something like that. Since some of the big stars, said they're not going to be there really mentally. So that's just kind of my thought. The Nets and Lakers game from a few nights back. A lot of people said, well, it's an NBA preview, NBA Finals preview. Like, what happens if the Nets win? What happens if Lakers win? Blah, blah, blah. Honestly, the game meant nothing to me. I don't think it should mean anything to anyone else. KD wasn't playing. AD wasn't playing. I get that Harden and Kyrie were playing and LeBron was playing, but it's a regular season game in February. I get that there's not that much to talk about it, so you have to gas this game up as much as possible, and it's just a talking point where, you can talk about it for an hour and a half on, all the big TV shows, and then the day after you could talk about the results and what the conclusions and stuff like that. So if Nets won, that should be the favorites to win the title. If Lakers won, LeBron could do it without AD. Lakers, I don't think can do it without AD though. LeBron, unless they add players to their roster, like big time players, which I don't know if they can do. I mean, you have to be stupid enough to take some of the players that they. No offense to any of the players on their team, but like, I'm not giving you my star player for Caruso and Wes Matthews and stuff like that. So this game really didn't tell me anything. If AD's healthy and KD was healthy, maybe it tells me a little something, but I'm not big into those January, February matchups that could possibly be an NBA preview and what we learned from the games and stuff like that. I'm not big into that stuff because playoffs is a totally different game. Stuff slows down. It's like a chess match, like trying to match piece for piece and stuff like that. So I don't take much from it, and that goes for any game that happens during the regular season. I just don't take too much from it. It's great to see these games. There's no doubt about that. But the conclusions that you can draw, I don't really know. I don't believe in that stuff. I mean, a few years back, when the Raptors, I think the Raptors swept the Washington Wizards in the regular season like 4-0, and then Raptors got swept by the Wizards 4-0 in the playoffs. So Raptors did the sweeping in the regular season, Wizards did the sweeping in the postseason. So how much can you learn? I don't know. So yeah, that's what I think about that. So staying with the Lakers, the AD injury. So I thought, AD's he just picks up these nagging injuries. Like it's just all over the body. It's like hand one game, then it's, misses 3 games with a shoulder injury, then a sprained ankle for 3 games. Then, it's all these little nicks and knacks, but this one's a little bit more serious. When you have to miss significant time with an injury, I think the team needs to sit you. And this should be a time when, now that AD's out, this should be a time when the Lakers go out and maybe look to add a third piece. Depending on what, Kuzma does through this stretch. I know they're playing Miami as I record this. But if he can step in, and they just lost to Miami by 2. But if he can step up and show that he can be like a third guy, then maybe you don't pull the trigger on another trade. But I mean, do you trust in Kuzma? Sure, he could come out and give you 25 one game, but he could also come out the next game and give you 5 on 2 of 10 shooting. So I don't know. If I were them, I wouldn't really wait for Kuzma. He's been in we have more than a small sample size to know what he can and can't do in this league. So if they feel that they need to go out and get a third piece, then that's exactly what they should do, and I think that they should. If they can flip some of their guys to get another third piece in that starting lineup, that's something I would think of doing. Dennis Schroeder, we'll see what happens with him going forward. He's a different playoff performer than he is in regular season, so that's something to keep an eye on. I get that he can be a really good player in the regular season, as he showed last year. But in the playoffs, it's a little bit different. I think his numbers dropped down, points per game dropped by 4 or something, because it's a different game in the playoffs, where it feels like every possession counts from quarter 1 to quarter 4. So that's something he's going to have to, adjust to on this new Lakers team, where he's the third, sometimes even the fourth option, depending on who's on the floor. If AD and LeBron are on the floor, then he's third. But if you add Montrez to the lineup, then Schroeder goes to fourth. And if someone has a hot hand, maybe Schroeder's fifth, with Caldwell Pope and these guys. So it's just something to keep an eye on. But like I said, I would sit out AD until he does heal, at least until he gets to 100%. The issue is, what if they really go on a bad losing streak with AD out? Then what do you do? although they've built up enough of a lead that even if they, drop 5 or 6, they'll still be third or fourth or fifth or whatever. And then, when AD comes, if he's healthy for the playoffs, I wouldn't want to play Lakers in the first round. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. But you don't want to lose a lot of games where, the chemistry kind of gets worse and stuff like that. And you never know what can happen. I mean, even if they finish fourth, like, the fifth place team could be rolling, stuff like that. So you can't take things like that for granted. But like I said, I would sit him out until he's fully healthy, or at least close to fully healthy. Like we saw what happened when Golden State tried to, bring back KD in the finals, and he ends up, missing out the entire season. You don't want that to happen with AD, and still a very young player. And it's just been a weird season for AD. Like, it's been a very weird season for AD. He's only averaging, I say only, but like 22 points a game and something like 8.5 rebounds. And worst of all, like, his free throw percentage is at like 71. He's usually like mid 80s, I believe, or low 80s. So his game has suffered a little bit this season. Maybe it's something to do with the short rest. But, LeBron's out there playing every game, although LeBron's chasing different things. But LeBron's out there playing every game. So it kind of makes you think. And, like, in terms of AD's contract, like, it's a lot of money. Does he deserve it? Yes, he does. But there's always, like, these injuries. Like I said, there's always these nagging injuries, like a shoulder, a finger, stuff like that. So I'm sure Lakers don't regret giving him the money. And it's not like they would admit it even if they did anyways. But it's something to definitely watch going forward and what the Lakers do. I think for sure they're going to be in the market for a big man. Like DeMarcus Cousins looks like he's going to cut ties with the Houston Rockets because they want to go a little bit smaller when Christian Wood does get back from injury. So surprise, surprise, Houston going small. So yeah, teams are going to be all over DeMarcus Cousins. I think maybe even my Toronto Raptors, have some issues with big men. They might look at DeMarcus Cousins. Lakers for sure will look at DeMarcus Cousins. He's already been on that roster. Brooklyn Nets, if they can kind of make it work there. They're missing big men. He could step out, hit the three. So I feel bad for DeMarcus though, because he never really got that big payday. He suffers, what was that, Achilles injury, and then he never gets paid, and he's bouncing around from team to team, what it feels like every season for the last 3 or 4. So he's a heck of a player to watch too. Like, the guy can put up 30, 15, and 10 like there's no tomorrow. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of, I think, as the trade deadline approaches, like, you're going to be hearing more and more names, guys on the trade block. Like, we'll see what happens with Vucevic in Orlando as well. T. Ross is a good 3-point shooter. It depends on where they're going. Like, I think they need to kind of blow things up over there and get some draft. They could get a lot of draft picks for some of the guys that they can trade. Like, Vucevic can get you probably 2 firsts and players, and T. Ross could probably get you a first, and Aaron Gordon, depending on how serious his injury is, he could probably get you some picks, although I believe he just re-signed this offseason. So but yeah, like, it's going to be interesting. A lot of teams are going to have a lot of guys out there. Lonzo Ball too is another guy whose name's kind of been floated out there. But yeah, the AD injury needs to be treated seriously, just because he has had a lot of nagging injuries this season, and if he needs to sit out a bunch of games, like he will for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, then that's what they need to do, because they need him fully healthy for the playoffs. A lot of good teams in the West this season. So yeah, that's something that they need to focus on. That's it for this week's episode, folks. Like I actually didn't say this, but I might be back on Wednesday for a little preview of the return leg of AC Milan and Red Star. So you catch that. If I do one, it'll probably be on Wednesday. And then next Friday or Saturday, I'll see you again for This Week in Sports. Take care, guys. Stay safe.